Hey, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today is the last notary governance call of 2021. So cue either the nostalgia or the excitement on what's to come. And we have a pretty packed day for you. So this means being recorded. You're watching live or with us now. And let's take a look at what the agenda is. What we're going to hope to cover is I'll make a pass and I'll pass it over to Galen if there's anything else you want to add to this. We're going to line up. We're going to start with a look back at like what kind of metrics we pulled, is what the program is doing. We're going to give you a quick update on what the goals are that we see for the coming 2022 and just check in and keep you in the loop of that. We're going to talk a little bit about just the community, making sure that your calendars are all set to go, making sure that we're talking about what times like the foundation will be kicking off for the holidays. We're going to get into details on the LDN step increase for the data. We're going to talk about everything going on with the Slingshot Restore. We have Deep to talk about that with us. We have some community flags that came through over the GitHub repo, so we'll allocate some time for that. And we'll, as always, save time at the end. So if there's any alibis or anything you wish to cover that we didn't set up, we'll have plenty of time to go into that. Galen, is there anything else that we should have on this agenda that we're going to rock and roll then? Galen, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, just kind of looking back, a reminder for those that are with us, FIP 003 was created October 2020. So kind of the overall Filecoin Plus program is just a little over a year. I've been here less than that time, but just looking back at some of the stats of what we've accomplished this year, at the first round of notary elections, we had 1.8 petabytes of data cap and 12 notaries. We are now, at this point in the year, we've sent out 7.7 petabytes of data cap to 28 notaries. And we're looking at doing another election cycle in Q1, where, I mean, it is safe to assume that those numbers are going to increase even more, that we will have an order more notaries and more data cap going out. Looking at sort of how our data cap was getting to our clients. In December of 2020, notaries allocated 78 tebibytes to clients, 78 tebibytes. In November of 2021, notaries allocated 1.6 petabytes to clients. So, I was going to pull December's stats, but that wouldn't be fair. And looking at November 2020 stats isn't fair. So yes, these are a month and a year apart, but that's a 2,000% increase. Just in November alone this year, we worked with 103 clients in 1 month. And in December, it was 19 last year. So notaries significantly ramping up the impact that we are having. Looking at our LDN program that launched in June of this year, so it's really only been going for a handful of months. We now have 85 open issues. Just in the past 2 weeks, I think we have had something like 30 more applications come through. So seeing some significant spikes in that, some of which relate to the Slingshot program, which Deep will talk to later. But so we have 85 open issues with 214 petabytes allocated to those multi-sigs, and 2.6 petabytes has been already sealed in deals. So just looking at sort of the impact that our programs are having on the overall network, massive. So great job. Thanks, everybody. I can do this one too, yeah. So our metrics, like that was kind of from then and now, looking at our metrics specifically, just to remind everybody where we are. We've made it under that 2-day threshold for time to data cap. Our allocations the past 30 days are getting close to like 1 day, which is phenomenal. Looking at the direct notary, it's still at 11 days. So that's, I think, about the same that it has been. So we're kind of wanting to keep thinking about that. And response time from notaries is at 6 days on average. We still see a similar, there's like a slight difference in the breakdown as we start getting into direct notary activity versus LDN activity. 3 PB to clients versus 6.7 to clients from LDNs. But what we've been seeing that is interesting is sort of the split from client to deals. As you can see here in direct notary activity, that's getting closer to 50% of the data cap. So 50% of the data cap that has been given to clients, they have used in deals. In LDNs right now, that is closer to 40%. Those have been really close together. It'll be interesting to see if one really starts to pull ahead, where when a client is getting the data cap, they're using it in deals faster, and we're seeing more of it go out. So we'll just see. But again, lots of data cap at the top of the funnel and working its way from notaries and multi-sigs to clients, and then from clients to deals. So very happy about these stats. Next slide has direct notary activity. 26 open issues in the direct client onboarding, 51 just in the last week, 11 that have been granted in the last 7 days. I think this is about, I think these are mostly about average to what they have been. About 64% are getting a response, and about 23 clients out of the 79 so far, like this month, are getting data cap. So those, I think, are about where we've been seeing those numbers. And we're still pulling this snapshot of impact and hoping to kind of translate some of the stuff into that leaderboard that I think K-Ray will be talking about soon. Kick it to Deep for these updates.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Wanted to bring back this for today's Notary Governance call to chat through our different goal areas for 2021 Q1. You're all quite familiar with this at this stage, but for those of you that are hearing or seeing this for the first time, this is sort of the 5 main focus areas we have for the different work efforts within the Falcon Plus ecosystem. First of which is volume, where the goal here is ensuring that data cap itself is like plentifully available and abundant for the trustworthy clients that should be receiving it. The current status of this, actually, as of like late last night, is in my time zone, is 127 PB. Our goal is to get to about 500. The way I do this math is basically I take that 7.7 number that Galen called out earlier, and that's the sort of the second number in the parentheses. And then 119.5 is the sum of all the data cap that is given to LDNs that have already received at least one signature. So even if an LDN has been created, but that data cap is never given to the client, it shouldn't show up here, and so it doesn't. And so we're hoping that this number continues to go up. I think a good way to think about this is the amount of data cap that has been given to notaries that will be given to clients, plus the amount of data cap with LDNs that's been committed to clients. So because we changed the flow for the LDNs to get stood up quicker, there wasn't actually there's no longer a due diligence threshold necessarily on before like the LDN gets stood up to speed up the process. And so this is just a flag where if you go to the dashboard, you might see a number that's higher than 200 PB, for example, for the amount of data cap that's sitting with LDNs. Goals here are basically improving the flow even further, looking at ways in which we can unlock greater, understanding responsiveness from notaries in terms of like what they need to do. And then I think the big one here would actually be streamlining client applications. So like standardizing a little bit on the expected quality and the expected amount of data required from a client. Like having a uniform application process is the first step in that direction, but there's probably a lot more we can do in terms of like how we extract the data from a client as soon as possible and reduce the amount of back and forth that would be required for the general interaction between a notary and a client. Next up, we've got time to data cap, which is our sort of leading metric in the Filecoin Plus ecosystem. This one we've seen like tremendous gains in the last several weeks and months. Our goal is, of course, still tremendous gains away, but we're making great progress. There was a time where getting data cap was like a multi-week affair, even at smaller amounts of data cap. I know we were averaging even like above 10 days for the longest time, and that number is starting to drop pretty drastically. I'm sure that's some combination of greater volume coming in through our automated verifiers, because we also recently hit 1,000 unique client addresses on chain that have received data cap. But of course, a lot of it is also because I think notaries are just getting faster, better, and more efficient at doing what they were doing before, just getting used to what they need to do and getting just in general, like understanding like what they need to get before they have the confidence to proceed. Our LDN process still has a very high variance. It's hard to measure this one. We need to get better metrics in place, but this is anywhere from like 1 day to like 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And so generally bringing this down will probably be great too. I think let's just go on to the next thing. I think we've talked about the automation stuff plenty before. On the risk mitigation standpoint, this is sort of a proxy for like transparency in the system and like wanting to generally have more people participate and understand in what's actually happening in the Falcon Plus ecosystem, but then also write interesting analysis and tooling on top of it that can aid us as a community in better decision making, in better process development, in better program management. And so this one we've had like pretty good progress, actually, not because like I think there was any intentional effort necessarily, but rather that it's an interesting topic for a lot of people. And so we started this year with 0 actual published dashboards. We got to half a year with about 2-ish dashboards, one thanks to the file drive team that built one, and then the other where we've been partnering with Digital Mob to get one out there. And so we've got 2 dashboards that have gone through like several months of vetting and feedback between the community. But as of recent, like last month, 2 more dashboards have popped up, and 1 more is in development for like fraud and audit tracking more closely. So I think we're doing really well on this front, and I'm excited for more collaboration and more discussion on this so that we can make all of these more effective and efficient. Just a quick flag, I think I mentioned this at a previous Notary governance call, but we now have a channel specific to dashboards in Falcon Plus. Sorry, not Falcon Plus Slack, in Falcon Slack, specifically for Falcon Plus dashboards. So in case you're interested, it's #Phil-Plus-dashboards. A little quiet in there right now, but I'm hoping that that's probably going to become a hub at some point in the near future for conversation around analytics, data transparency, data collection. So excited to see you there if you have got questions or feedback or want to work on something in this space. Next up, client onboarding. I think this is the one where we probably had the least amount of progress so far between like when we set these goals at the end of, at the start of, I guess, Q4, end of Q3 to Q1. But also probably a lighter weight one initially. There's definitely been ideas circulating in the community, especially around just improving documentation and stuff. So I'm really hoping that we can get to it as a group, early in the new year, and make sure we get like a higher quality set of things that we can ensure results in both clients, but also notaries falling into the pit of success with our various mechanisms that we have built out. Last and absolutely not the least is Falcon Plus governance. Exciting news on this front is that I think KRA just facilitated the public posting of the RFP for the Notary leaderboard, which is something we've talked about for several weeks as a community, and I've been excited to see get done. So if you are aware of any teams that are interested, I think there might be more info on this later on. You should feel free to follow up with KRA in the chat, but definitely take a look at that and see if that's something that you'd be willing to partner with or are excited to help out with. In general, I think we're also getting a little bit more used to this combination of like discussions with issues, which I think has been good, and engagement on that front has been great. And then really excited for like the surveys that KRA has already started doing with some of you, and we'll be continuing to do to ensure that we're able to engage folks in a way that makes sense for them, and we're able to gather that feedback and make things more interesting, engaging, efficient, effective. So yeah, good progress on that one for sure. Really thankful that KRA is here to spearhead many of these efforts.
One question.
Thanks, please go ahead, Noel.
I just have one question. So many people that are doing the Slingshot repair program, they are asking for 100 terabytes of data cap. What are we supposed to do with that? Like, because they are not like, as an example, I received 2 requests from Chinese miners. So I mean, our clients, let's say. What I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to support them. 100 terabyte anyway, it's too much for me. That's my total data cap allocation.
Yeah.
So how should we manage that? So is it supposed to be covered by the local notaries? Are we going to have more data cap to distribute to support them? What's the plan and what's your idea on that?
Let's talk about that further down. Julian, I think
sorry.
you missed the start. I think Galen has given us time to talk specifically about Slingshot Restore. So we'll get to it soon in a bit, and we'll discuss it then.
Sorry,
Great question though, and I think very, very topical. Okay, I think that's it on the goals front. I'm handing it back to you then.
All right. Everyone, you are going to see your calendar update tomorrow. We are going to be resetting the cadence for this. So this is just one of those, just kind of talking about it before we do it. And you'll also notice that next week is the holidays here in the States, celebrating Christmas. So we're going to have reduced response times. So what that means is that if you write into Slack or there's a big issue, I don't think we can get away from checking our phones. Just welcome to 2021. I don't know about you, I check that before I get out of bed and then right when I crawl into it. But if there's anything major, let us know and we'll obviously triage that with firefighting. Otherwise, you'll see reduced response times for anything in the repo, anything on Slack, as we kind of take some time to celebrate our families and recharge. Hope you do the same. When we come back, the first sync of 2021 is going to take place on January 4th. So you'll see a brand new invite come. I'll be messaging you. Right now, what we do is we have the Notary governance call where you can add on the Google Calendar. We'll still do that. And I'll also be sending pings. Sometimes it's helpful to have that calendar manually added to your own. So if you want to be on that invite list, I'll send you a ping. And that makes it nice if you want to have that be part of your own calendar without having to follow it. So we'll follow up with that if that's helpful for you. And then taking place going forward, January 11th, that's when the new schedule starts every other Tuesday. And we're still getting feedback on the times to make sure that this time works for all of you in all the time zones. Incorporating the entire globe has been a little bit of a challenge. So we're constantly tweaking that to make that format work for everybody. And so we'll still collect your feedback. If you have thoughts, please let us know. So with that, let's talk about the Notary leaderboard. So what we have in mind and what we've submitted for the RFP is essentially a public display of awesomeness. And just because a lot of us are nerds, we have it laid out like a video game format where you can actually see like, how do we stack rank? And what we're doing is we're taking some of the fields that are work that's being done. So like, how long has someone been a notary? What's the time to data cap? You can see the board that we have set up. So that RFP is out. We're looking for bids on this. So if you know somebody or that's in the field that wants to submit for this, we're hoping to get started ASAP. And so we're blasting this wide and proud. And hopefully this will get launched in early January, February. We have this up where you can start to see some of these metrics and have some comparison charts as we go through. So really excited about this. Also really keen on feedback. So you'll be seeing some more polys come out. The goal of those are just really quick check-ins on like, what are your thoughts? What can we do better? It's designed to be like 2 minutes of a survey or less right there in Slack. Obviously, it's completely optional, but that feedback, it gets taken into account. That's why we're here and why we're listening. So with that, let's kind of jump into the governance discussions. I'll hand it back to Gail.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah. So if you want that money, if you have friends that are great developers and they want that money, jump on that. The Filecoin Foundation is trying to get grants out the door. That's our job. One of our jobs. Okay, so shifting gears here, we had a discussion topic for a while. I've now made it into a proposal to add 2 more steps to the LDN. Okay, Ray, would you mind clicking on that governance issue specifically? You can open another tab. I don't think this is going to be super controversial. I'm just going to talk through it really quick, and then we're going to pause for a few seconds and take questions. The current calculation has 3 steps, right? We're familiar with those. It's either 5% of total or 50 weekly, 10% of total, 100% weekly, 20% total or 200% weekly. And that's where it has capped out. We've had, I think, 3 clients get to this third allocation at this point. And it is, it creates a bit of a slowdown for them to only ever have a max of 200% of their weekly. So it seems very safe, and it is a very low technological lift to just add 2 more allocation steps, so that the 4th allocation would be 40% or 400% weekly, 5th allocation, 80% total or 800% weekly. This still gets us that scale, so that if we have an LDN that we don't really know the client, we don't really know the project, they're still starting with a small amount of data cap up front while they start making deals, and it lets us see, but they know that they can get to an 8-week runway of data cap. This is not necessarily saying we won't still investigate other mechanisms. This is just a proposal to add 2 more steps. So I want to pause here and see if there are specific questions, comments, or concerns about this, and you can also post them in the issue itself. Pausing. Wait time. All right. I take that as you all love it and think it's the best idea you've heard of since eggnog. If that's the case, we're going to discuss it again. I may want to push this forward so that it's ready in January to be implemented. We've already talked to our the Kiko Tech team, and it's not incredibly difficult to add those extra calculations to the code. So we will keep you posted, and by the next Notary governance call on the 11th, we may just do one more round of does anyone have a concern, and then push it out the door. So check it out, review it. That was all on that discussion topic. I think back to the slides. The next thing up is the Slingshot Restoration Initiative. Over to Dee.
All right. Cool. Let's talk about this. So I'm sure a lot of you have already seen stuff on this in Slack or in general, heard about it before this, because even if you hadn't, you heard Julian talk about it precisely 4 minutes ago. So you've definitely heard about it now. To give you a little bit of context, there was an incident that resulted in a tremendous data loss from the Falcon network approximately 2 weeks ago, less than that actually. It was the prior weekend, so about 10 days ago or so, resulting in both the loss of several sectors with nothing in them, with something in them. But the biggest loss is on the Slingshot front, where close to 13 petabytes of content was lost over the course of the weekend because of a fire in a data center. And so in general, we kicked off recovery efforts in Slingshot using 2 parallel programs, one called Restore, the other called Repair. You've heard less about Repair because that one is a much smaller scope and is flowing through Estuary today. So from a what do we care about in Falcon Plus perspective, that's already sort of accounted for. There's a bunch of vetting happening there to ensure that Estuary is continuing to do the same level of account management, storage provider diversification, and all the other things that resulted in them getting data cap as a deal broker for the network in the first place. So I'm mostly here to talk about Restore, because that's really where I think you're going to see a lot of traffic, especially in GitHub and Slack. And I want to walk you through the program, as well as give you all the resources that you need to understand how you want to support it or not. But in general, for context, data loss of this nature is not common, but definitely happens at even the Web2 cloud provider scale. It's just that end users typically have no idea that it happened, because they're so good at rebuilding replicas, flipping over traffic, ensuring that there's always somewhere for the request to go, that it is very, very difficult as a user of a Web2 cloud to like realize if a storage service has actually received any sort of interruption. And so what we're trying to do with Slingshot Restore is sort of set the precedence for the first time where that's actually happening at this scale in the Falcon network. And we're kind of excited to see what we can do in terms of testing the limits of getting data at this scale back onboarded onto the Falcon network. And so specifically, we're talking about approximately 2.5 unique PB of like data sets that were identified as part of the Slingshot program that are then getting replicated at least 5 times, resulting in 12.5 PB of Slingshot data being re-onboarded to Filecoin. And a lot of this is like more painful work in terms of like needing to go back to the source of the data. So like the original, bucket on S3 in the best case scenario, but otherwise like going to the research programs, the website to download the data set and store it. And so clients that are participating in this program are applying to participate, being manually selected based on like when they applied, their experience, location, the ability to process data quickly, and then being given access to a list of miners that are also applying to participate, being vetted based on experience, location, ability to seal quickly, and also access to capital. Like we're frankly asking them how much Falcon they have, because it's going to limit their ability to onboard verified versus unverified content in terms of the collateral that they will need to front as storage providers. And so we're sort of facilitating this as a much more curated marketplace for deals where it's like a specific set of clients with a specific data set assigned to them, working with a specific set of storage providers where there's requirements to decentralize that, where at least out of those 5 replicas, there's coverage for 3 different countries and 2 different continents. So your worst case scenario will be 3 replicas will be in the same country, but even those we're tracking to ensure are in different cities. And so we're hoping to build a much more resilient layer for this Slingshot data, which will be compelling in the future for both externally from like the standpoint of wanting to have a mirror of some valuable research data on the network, but also from the perspective of setting the precedents on how to handle data loss in the network, understanding the different bottlenecks that exist in the network and how we want to improve them for the future. But also for features that are coming early in Q1, for example, around indexing and wanting to ensure that like the data that we're collecting, leverages what's available on the network in a way that it's truly useful. And so we're going as far as actually syncing with clients on a weekly basis to ensure that like they're actually understanding the requirements, complying with them, able to make progress, and if not, choosing to drop out as soon as possible so that they can sort of pass that torch on to the next person. And so that also includes them like publicly stating the exact storage providers they're working with and us specifically assigning them to data sets. So it's a very auditable process, and everything's in sort of available to anybody to look at. And so with that, Galen, maybe you hop to the next slide and I can walk you through some of the content that's available, because what's happening today is a lot of these guys are asking to get data cap, especially from the LDN process. So Julian, it's Kere who's driving. My bad. Sorry. Thanks, Kere. Julian, you mentioned, do you want to give your own data cap for this? And I actually think that's probably not a good idea, mostly because, firstly, each of these clients is going to require 500 terabytes of data cap at minimum, right? Because each of them is doing at least 100 terabyte like set of data, going to replicate it 5 times. No single notary here, other than like 4, have access to like more than like a terabyte of data cap that could be useful. Also, because this is something where like somebody might like not fully go all the way through the program, then having like gates that like give them tranches makes a lot more sense, where we can see the progress they're making and continue to give them data cap. And because this program kicked off last week and is probably going to run nonstop at full velocity through the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks, that probably means you want to share the burden as a notary to unblock these clients with other notaries that are available. And so taking this on as an individual notary probably is not the move. I would say it's much better to go via the LDN process, and recommend that the clients reaching out to you do the same, just because it's so transparently auditable that like you don't need to like build that individual like trust with the client as much, because you can just do that in the open. And so some links probably worth clicking on, Kere, those 3 if you don't mind, where it says data set assignments, address info and approved SPs. Yeah. So this is the list of storage providers that are currently verified. This is live. We're keeping this updated based on applications that we're receiving. If you scroll to the right, this includes how much they're able to store, where they're located and stuff, so we can ensure SP diversity. If you want to hit the next link in the slide. Boom. This is their actual addresses registered on chain and the storage providers they're committed to currently working with. This is compelling because it should map to exactly where like data cap is being requested. So when an application comes in for an LDN and you're a notary and the application claims to be coming in for data cap, here's where you can actually look at the client name, their Slack handle, and the address that they've registered for the program. And for the like actual like storage provider deal distribution plan, literally this is it. Like we have all the data, and so we can validate that the replicas are coming up where required. And the last link, Kere, in the slide is helpful. Oh wait, what? Did I copy the same link twice? The first link is probably incorrect on the slide then, because that should have been a data set assignments. That's okay. If you go back to the third tab that you have, your tab in your browser, two over, one to the left of that one. Yes. If you go to the next tab in the spreadsheet where you see data sets, cool. Yeah. So this is the actual list of data sets. So I'll fix the link in the slide so you have like the mapping between which clients are working on what data set as well. But this is basically taking the data that was lost from the network, in that the CIDs are not available anywhere in the Falcon network. So knowing that we basically have to regenerate it by reprocessing the data resulted in these data sets being identified as like the ones that need to be restored onto the Falcon network. We're trying to be conservative here in that we're like definitely picking more unique data than before, because in Slingshot, the average replication factor was closer to 8. So like less unique data was probably lost and it was just replicated more times. But this is more interesting because this time through this process, we're getting a much higher quality of compliance and storage and partnership with clients and storage providers to ensure things are happening correctly. And so on this particular page is where you can actually check. So I'll update the link, but basically I'll give you a mapping that says for this client name, this is the set of data sets they're actually working on. So then when you go to that tab that Kere has on the issue list for the large data set applications that are coming in, the last one on your browser, sir, over to the right. That one. Yes. Okay. So
Yep.
these you can actually go and validate. You can see like there, like if you click into an application, I don't know, let's click the first one. I haven't looked at these yet. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so this one looks to be from Flyworker, who is, it's Charles Cow, and he specifically is working on storing the Flybrain anatomy data set and is requesting data cap for it. And so what you can do is you can actually go and look at the list of clients that are participating. I'm going to give you the right link for this.
Yeah, jumping in here, I was just going to say, Kere, if you could hit back one and just go back to that overall view. At this point, we have 9 open LDNs on the Slingshot Restore. And so a number of them have already been granted. Some of them are still waiting for signatures. Please go sign ones that are waiting for signatures. As Deep is saying, there is a lot of auditing and diligence happening. And he does bring up a point of the question of like, should we be adjusting requested amounts before approving them, which we can discuss. But a number of the applications themselves were a little bit light because all of this information about what they were assigned wasn't determined when they put the application in. So we can kind of push back on these clients to go edit their applications or add some more details as well.
Yeah. So the last link I sent in the chat, I'll edit that on the slide so you have it. We're looking at the deck later, but that's the list mapping the. So yeah, on the you have the person's name, the Slack handle, and their actual data set assignment, and the next tab tells you what data sets are comprised in each of the assignment like groupings. And so there's 21. Sorry,
there's an ask on that other client assignment sheet. If we could get more, like if we could get their address. I saw their address in another place, but on that one where it just has name and Slack, because not everyone's GitHub lines up to that. So there were a couple questions. So Deep, I don't know, that was posted in the Notary's channel yesterday. I don't know if you've seen it, but that client assignment list where it just has name, Slack, assignment number, if we could add another column that's either address or GitHub handle.
Yeah.
I
think we could, I think address is probably the right way to go, because that's what we're tracking as well. And so I could just make another sheet that combines those things into maybe one view and share that with the notaries. Easy. Carrie, do you mind switching back to the slides? Cool. So the real ask like here actually is that Restore is the first time we're actually end-to-end testing high quality restoration of data loss on the network, setting the tone for how we view it from an urgency and a prioritization perspective is going to be paramount to ensuring long-term success of the network and ensuring that the network is built to handle this kind of loss and failure. And so having you folks engaged and checking this stuff, hopefully, you know, it's lightweight enough where we can get all the data for you and we're doing all the math and ensuring that things are like not like going completely awry is a good first level. You can do any additional due diligence beyond that and ask any questions that you have, you know, either here or in Slack or anywhere. But the idea being that basically we are probably running the largest effort on the network so far to get this amount of data onboarded in such a short amount of time, and like really testing the limits on like a physical scale, even when it comes to networking, hardware, compute, things like that. And so given that there's like significant amounts of vetting happening, tracking happening, auditable content put out there, I'm hoping that for the projects that are looking for the support of Falcon Plus, because not everybody is actually, because of collateral requirements from storage providers, but for the ones that are, we're able to funnel them through as required. And that also then means that some notaries are probably going to get pinged later this week and next. And so in case you are around and you happen to not be off, then would really request your time in helping process some of this stuff. I also noticed that in attendance, we have a couple of Slingshot Restore clients. I see Shinan, Faye, a couple others in here as well. If you guys want to add anything, please feel free to.
No, just beside quicker response if possible. That's it.
Cool.
Julian, did we answer your questions or did you still have?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. Oh, looks like Eric has a hand.
Hello?
Hey, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to ask two questions about the Slingshot Restore. Actually, a lot of storage provider comes to us and asking for joining this program. So did this program open for the Chinese storage provider?
So I think at this point, the majority of the storage providers that were put through were actually in NA in Europe. From my understanding, like some of the storage providers I've spoken to in China are a little bit concerned with onboarding at this rate, especially with like regulation stuff. And so like I think the focus right now is still like NA EU replicas of the data. Eric, if you have specific thoughts on that, I would love to like follow up. We can do that in a DM or chat about it and see how we can get more validated storage providers in the China region also. But a lot of folks I talked to flagged that it was a risk from a regulation standpoint, and I don't know if we should be pushing people to overcommit, because this is like a very sort of fast-paced thing that's going to probably take a lot of bandwidth, take a lot of time and effort, and so just want to make sure that we're doing things correctly.
Understand. So that means case by case, right?
Probably, and I would love your advice because I mean I don't know the regulatory environment as well as you do probably, and so happy to take suggestions and advice and feedback on that.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, question number 2. So I say so we will go through with all the LDN and we will use our ledger to approve it, but actually our ledger gets something wrong again, like last time. So when we approve the data sets, sorry, the LDN, and we found the transaction code propose again. So when I help Yanfei to approve his data set, but actually they show me propose, so they got stuck. So we don't know why. So maybe
I know why.
we need your help.
So 3 or 4 days ago, one of the bots shut down again. And so when a message would go through the front end, it would post in the GitHub comment, the message would work successfully, but it didn't, because one of the bots was off, it didn't change the label. So it didn't have an approval count of 1 on the app. So then when a notary went to sign again, even though there is a pending transaction, because the app doesn't catch that approval count of 1, it still says approval 0. When another notary goes to sign, it starts another transaction ID. So Faye, this is happening for yours. This happened for a number of different notary LDNs this weekend, where they would send a message because it didn't change the labels to start sign and it didn't change the approval count. The next notary to send a message started another transaction. So now there are multiple LDNs where there are 2 transaction IDs. I think I have caught and edited all of those labels, and the bots are back online and we're seeing more success. So we just need another notary to jump in and sign it. And it should match to one of those existing pending transactions. Also, we are working and very close to having a log explorer that will be able to post all of the bot logs publicly for the app, so that we can see, in a situation like this, I posted this message, the bot didn't recognize it, what's going on, and we can troubleshoot and debug faster. So that's the situation. It was not exclusive to you or your ledger from what I can tell, and it should be fixed now.
Okay, clear. So according to the schedule of the community's holiday, so for China, we will keep working by the end of January 2020. So that's for more than 2 weeks holiday from the US side, right? So actually we hope we can fix the problem and we will keep working on all the LDNs. Otherwise we will stop our working. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think at least I'll be around for the most part, and I think some of the other folks in this call definitely will. And so looking forward to seeing you on Slack at least, Eric. Take care. Cool. I think unless there's any other questions on Slingshot Restore side, I'm good to turn it back to any additional discussion topics that you want to flag, Kerry and Gillen, and others as well, of course.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Just wanted to know, like, do we have any ideas when is going to be the next
Election?
notary election?
Yeah, I think loosely we're targeting Q1. I know Galen mentioned this earlier in the call as well, where like we probably need to do another round like in early in the new year. I don't know if we have a specific date yet, but realistically, typically we want to announce these things and then keep applications open for 2 to 3 weeks, and then it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do like all the stuff after that. So earliest would be like probably finishing the entire round by end of Feb. And so probably somewhere between, I'd say mid-Jan and mid-Feb start. So yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, forgot to call that out actually. We had our first LDN finish like actually give out all the data cap that it had successfully, meeting the compliance set out by the client who's in the call right now in terms of the storage providers they wanted to use. So that is pretty epic. Congratulations, Faye. Like, great work as a client, like keeping up to code, keeping up to compliance, and keeping the entire community aware of like the work that you were doing.
Yeah, just want to add some things more like Eric was mentioned just now. So because like in China, we are going to have like national holiday from the start of the February, so we are probably not gonna work from the end of the January. So yeah, so like maybe doing elections, we might encounter some problem at that time.
That is a very good flag. So either we should open and close the applications before that, because the processing can be done while you guys are up, or we start the applications after that.
Okay, sounds good.
I think that we should definitely play around that, because right now that is a region where, you know, we have the highest amount of notaries. So yeah. Oh my God. I also noticed that a couple of things I sent in chat didn't switch to the lobby after I'd messaged the waiting room. So I'm gonna resend a few things in the chat shortly. Thank you, Gillen, for letting me know.
Yeah, Deep's just been telling everybody that's in the waiting room. He's been giving them all the details. You guys don't know this because you're not hosts. There's actually a full waiting room of people that we chose not to let in because we decided that you know, 6 were more important. That's a lie. There's no one in the waiting room. Deep's just talking to himself.
Why does Zoom even let me do that? I don't know.
I don't know. It's
amazing.
weird.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Let's go on, I guess.
Well, we had this raised, and this is such a good question. I wanted to kind of post it here, but this was added to the GitHub repo. Gregory, do you want to kind of send a friendly intro and kind of set the stage for what the question is and for the open discussion?
Yeah, sure. Really appreciate getting on the agenda, and thank you all very much for your attention, and happy holidays, all that good stuff. Yeah, so I'm like brand spanking new to Filecoin and to Seal Storage, which is a data storage provider on the network. We just added about 20 petabytes, or we're in the process of right now. So we're very excited about that. But I come from the world of, like, you know, scientific instruments and R&D, and I've built stuff for NASA and NIST and DOE and things like that. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm like not a blockchain person at all. I'm just coming at this like from a business you know, standpoint, and from like a where is really exciting data standpoint. And so I've been reaching out to a lot of my contacts in like the, you know, interesting, you know, scientific places, and finding, you know, like a lot of like innovators in this space, you know, even like, you know, kind of like where we are, like before early adopters, people that have been dealing with petabytes for decades, and, you know, probably tried the data center thing, and then now are fighting like with Amazon, and then they talk to us and they're like, wow, there's this kind of awesome decentralized thing out there. Let's give it a shot. And so, because these are large scientific organizations, sometimes there's, you know, some politicking that has to happen internally before a major decision can be made to kind of try some new flavor of cloud storage. And that's, you know, that's how this is viewed. And so anyway, so we have a very exciting customer. The data itself is not confidential. It's just the customer wants to try a 10 petabyte pilot, which is a small amount of data for them. This is a particle accelerator data. It's compressed, not encrypted, and they just want to keep the pilot confidential to prove it out internally and kind of get the influence that they need inside the org, so they can go to management and they go, hey, look, this is awesome. We should really do this in a big way. And so anyway, so that's where this comes from. And I have about, or we have about maybe 5 or 6 other clients like this. We're not sure if they're all going to want the pilot to be confidential, but we're kind of stacking up some exciting scientific customers, dark matter, climate data, genome data, some really cool stuff. And anyway, and so this is unique to this first customer. Others may have this requirement. I'm not really sure yet. We're kind of, I'm learning in real time. We have a bunch of MOUs right now in process. And so anyway, just want to put this out to the community and see what the feedback was. And I can keep talking too if you want.
I mean, I have a question. I have some questions. So it sounds like the data itself is not encrypted. The data could be publicly available and downloaded by other members of the community. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so in that situation, what you're asking is to like keep the source, the client, confidential for now, but to still go through a Filecoin Plus verification process to then make these deals as verified deals with DataCap, correct? I'm correct so far?
100%. Yep.
Okay. And so then the last question that I have is, you're representing a storage provider. Is the intent here that for these 10 petabytes, you would be storing 10 petabytes, which is one copy, or one copy, which is 10 petabytes with yourself? Would you also be storing multiple other copies that are all also 10 petabytes total with other decentralized non-local storage providers that you are not in ownership of?
At this point, that is not part of the scope. We're kind of tiptoeing with this customer and doing what they would like to do. And so at this point, it looks like, they're going to take this, 10 petabytes and
right.
They're just,
I think
give it a shot.
I think that's the stickiest wicket for me, is that because part of the large data set process specifically is that these deals should be made across multiple storage providers to decentralize them and spread out that large data set and that data cap, both in different geographic regions and also different scales of storage providers. And so one of the things that we look for as we are doing diligence is the kind of percent allocation to a single storage provider. And so if a large data set gets approved and then turns around and is only working with one storage provider, that is typically deemed suspicious and not following kind of the current state of the program. I think the aspect of keeping the client themselves confidential is less is easier to get around, kind of how we can become comfortable with that and like how much diligence we can do and kind of being able to provide samples of the data for the notaries to look at. I think the hard part will be, how would we feel about not having multiple copies? Or is it something that we could push back to the client and say, what if, because again, 10 petabytes is pretty large. So for your information, in the scale of things right now, most of our large data sets, the current ceiling is 5 petabytes for a single application. And typically we see about 100 petabytes a week. And so as we talked about earlier in the call, I don't know if you were there for that, the allocation scales. So your first allocation is either 5% total or 50% weekly. So your first allocation would probably be 50 petabytes of data cap. And once you have used 75% of that, you could get the next allocation, which would probably be 100 petabytes. So it would also be highly unlikely for us to give a single client address, 10 petabytes of data cap, like straight out the door. So again, in thinking about how to make this kind of map a little bit more aligned to like things that we've been doing. We're at time. It may be that we need to push back and say, what if we did 5 copies of 1 petabyte across some decentralized people and started there? And would that be a good enough test? Those are just like some of my feedback questions.
Yeah, I think in general, Greg, one thing that would be interesting is like, wouldn't you want to do that as like a client from like a pure replication perspective, and from like in general, like having availability in like different places for reliability, availability?
Yeah, this is all good advice, and we'll have to. I guess this is brand new, so we'll have to take it in and develop a plan. It sounds like. I mean, on the other side, you know, we have this customer, and we're looking to prove out a concept for them, and so we're, you know, walking a line on the scope that they want to embrace. And so, you know, a lot of this, as I'm sure you know, is building trust, right, and storing data, right. This is you know, at you know, the ultimate. And so we've, you know, been working hard on those relationships. And, you know, I guess I would be curious to, you know, to hear a response on, you know, so if we're going to chop this up, I mean, now we're highly reliant upon brand new relationships, right, to help us with this very long and existing relationship. And so you can see how that kind of makes it, I'll say challenging, but I guess I would say that, right? So I guess I would love to hear a comment on that. Like, so we're going to adopt 3 or 4 or 5 partners, and, you know, are they all enterprise level, or they,
right? Well, I think
you know, those kinds of things.
Right. That is sort of the question with how do you pick a storage provider? And I think this goes to, we have some people that are acting as deal brokers, where they are sitting closer to the front working directly with clients, and they have relationships with a group of storage providers. Textile and Estuary are 2 examples where they are working as, you know, deal brokers to connect 2 different storage providers. It sounds like you are fitting in on a different part of this like marketplace, where you're a storage provider, you know, going out and doing business development with clients to work directly with you. So to your point of like, well, how do we find other storage providers that we have as much confidence in them as we do with ourselves, because our reputation is going to be on the line? It could be a question of, should you coordinate with one of these brokers? And maybe that would be a starting point. Anya, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
So just for clarity, so Textile and Estuary, you're saying would be people to work with, or?
They would be, to me, they would be interesting people to talk to. I'm going to let Anya.
I mean, I was already like chatting with him in private during the whole call, inviting him to Discord. And so yeah, I mean, we're working on this particular issue you're addressing. So it would be really cool if you could find time and we can hang out outside of the governance call. It would be really nice. It's a great, I mean, question also. We've been curious, and also working with I'm gonna butcher the name, Absentia. You know, so, yeah, with the research team. I mean, there's a couple of projects that might be interesting for you. So yeah, let's chat.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So yeah, I understand that, you know, doing this kind of very high level enterprise level business development requires a lot of relationship building and a lot of trust. I think that, you know, we don't have like a simple flat answer for you like right now today. I think, you know, my 2 big flags, like we've already talked to, and maybe getting in front of some of these, you know, other people in the community can also help. And then maybe the other next step is like finding, you know, there's like philrep.io, there's a couple different reputation sites, there's just various Slack channels for deal making, finding one other storage provider. Also talking to Faye, who was on the call earlier. He is a client. He acts as a client to do some of these Slingshot programs. He has storage providers that he works with that are in his network. That could potentially be another person. And maybe it's a situation where, you know, you need to onboard somebody as a consultant to find another way to like kind of decentralize. And I think to Deep's point, the pushback here to your client is, you say, we are advocating for this because this is why this is best practice in this network. you, the client, are going to get the choice. We're going to present to you, here's our level of storage provider service. Here's 6 other options. We encourage you to pick 3 because part of doing this is the act of decentralizing. That's why you choose this marketplace, so that you're not beholden to some other entity telling you and being in total control of your data set, where it's located, what it's stored on, is it at risk to catastrophic failure? That's the value prop of the Filecoin network. And so being able to kind of push that back to them and say, this isn't a challenge, this is the whole point of doing it this way. But I don't do biz dev. That's not my role. I'm not in sales. So I just wear funny hats and give advice.
Gotcha. So and I guess maybe I would talk with Anya about what a kind of data storage plan would look like. Is that what is that yes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, meet with Anya and you guys get an understanding of how Textile functions and how those deal brokers kind of manage their relationship with storage providers, and they can give their 2 cents.
Cool. Awesome. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I guess I got my homework. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Greg. Great to meet you. Yes, we're over time. Sorry, K-Ray.
Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. Just going to say the same thing. Gregory, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the calls. What we'll do is we'll migrate that conversation over to Slack, make sure that we've connected you guys. I shared the link to the deck. We'll put the recording on YouTube as always. And if there's anything else you want to flag, please let us know. And just the big takeaway is, again, with the holiday coming up, you might see response times delayed. If you send us multiple pings, though, this is on fire, you will obviously get our full attention on it. So just keeping that in mind. Otherwise, the warmest of Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you guys. And we'll see you on the keys. Deep, Galen, any closing thoughts?
I wish I was going to the keys. Christmas in the Keys sounds great.
Yeah. All right. Well, hello, as we fist pump and smile into the last Notary Governance Sync of 2021. Just wanted to start with a very friendly hello as we kick off. We went right up to the last minute, and we went 7 minutes over on the morning session of this. So we'll try to be conscious of time, and we might go a little bit faster because we had some questions that came up. As a reminder, we'll always post the video to YouTube and have that in Slack if you're curious to watch the morning session or have any questions. I put the deck inside of the Slack if you have any questions too, as we would follow along. So with that, let's take a look at what we're going to talk about today. On the agenda, Galen's going to walk us through a year in review and look at some of the milestones we hit in 2021, kind of a look back at growth and a little bit of back patting, which is well in order. We're going to do just a quick refresh from Deep on what are the goals that we're looking at for 2022 and what are we prioritizing and making sure that tracks in line with your expectations from the program. We're going to spend a moment or two on just kind of what's on the schedule for us in the community. What days are we meeting? What days are we not? Really just making sure that we don't leave anybody high and dry on that. Also check in on holiday planning. After that, we're going to spend a little bit of time on Galen's going to walk us through the LDN setup and some issues going on. Then we're going to dedicate a lot of time for a walkthrough from Deep, again, on the Slingshot issue. There's probably been a lot of questions, and he's going to walk us through in high-level detail some of the decks, the slides, and the databases that we're tracking with that. We had a question come up in the repo, and Gregory joined us in the morning, so we'll just kind of brief you on what that question was, making sure that you're read on, and then lots of time for any questions that you may have. So with that, if you have anything you want to add, as always, just unmute, post it in chat, and we'll jump through it. So with that, let's take a look back at 2021.
Yes, the year was 2020. The month was October. Galen was just a twinkle in Filecoin's eye, and FIP 003 was pushed and ratified to basically kick off the Falcon Plus program. So just as a reminder, as we talk through these metrics, Falcon Plus, in addition to the Falcon network, is still pretty young. So the first round of notary elections happened, beginning of like late last year, beginning of this year, with 1.8 petabytes of data cap going out to 12 notaries. Where we are now, we have, more than double those notaries and 7.7 petabytes of data cap that has gone out to notaries to then allocate around. Looking at the sort of client impact in December of 2020, in that month alone, 78 tebibytes went to 19 clients. In November of 2021, 1.6 petabytes went to 103 clients in that month. So that's a 2,000% increase in our sort of client impact. Very exciting, in my opinion. So the LDN program kind of kicked off officially June of this year. And since June, we are now looking at 85 open issues with 214 petabytes at the top to the multisigs. So not necessarily out to clients yet, but sort of locked up at the top. And then 2.6 petabytes have made it to deals. So just sort of, in this past year, the network has grown in a lot of different directions, but specifically the Filecoin Plus program, I would say, has accelerated a lot of the network growth, both in notary engagement, client engagement, and then deal flow. So very exciting stats there. Let's jump into kind of our typical stats view, looking at our metrics. Our average time to data cap is still under 2 days. We're excited about that. We're getting that average in the past 30 days even lower. We're getting close to that 1 day time, which is great. We want to keep driving that down. Still seeing about 11 days for direct notary path. That's been pretty similar to what it was, 11 to 12 days. About 6 days to get a response from a notary through the direct path. So that number, again, is about the same as it has been for a few weeks. Looking more closely at this funnel, we have 3 petabytes that has gone to clients in the direct notary process. Of that 3, 1.5 petabytes is being used in deals, so that's getting closer to 50% of that flow down. Versus in LDNs, we are now at 6.7 petabytes out to clients with 2.5 in deals. So that's about 37%. So those had been closer in percentage change to one another at about 30 to 40%. It'll be interesting to see if one of those starts to pull away. We may be replenishing LDNs faster because we're getting more LDNs in, which is going to be changing how that percentage is calculated. Clicking through to the next, looking at some direct notary activity. We got about 26 open issues currently in the repo, about 51 in the last week, and 275 with that label as granted, 11 in the past 7 days. These are pretty consistent. I don't think that we've seen like a significant increase or decrease in this activity. Still getting about 64% of them are getting a response, and about 23 of the 79 clients getting data cap per month. So we haven't seen like a significant change there. We have seen a pretty big increase in the number of LDNs and the frequency of LDN submissions. So something to track. We are still working on some tracking and analytics for time to data cap for LDNs and getting that reported out. And just sort of flagging some of these metrics. We'll be curious to see if there is a slowdown kind of in the next 2 weeks across Christmas and New Year's. And then another flag will be sort of the end of January going into February. There may be another slowdown with Chinese Lunar New Year. And we may see either less notary activity or less client activity. So just things to watch out for. I think with that, we'll send it to our man in the studio, Deep. to talk about goal updates.
Hello from the studio. I'm here to talk to you about Q1 2022 goal update progress. You are mostly familiar with this at this stage. If you're watching the recording, you just heard me talk about this about 35 minutes ago, so you know exactly what's going on. If you're here live, you're definitely familiar with this. And yeah, just to get into it across the different focus areas, the first of which is volume. Galen just dropped a really nice number in the 200s, but how I like to track this is specifically by looking at the amount of LDNs where data cap has actually been given to a client. So it's either cases in which they're not actively waiting, so they have a state granted, or if they're waiting, it's because it's a subsequent allocation, like a second or third or fourth allocation as opposed to a first allocation. And so if you look at the number of LDNs that have reached that point and are more just going through recurring data cap tranches and due diligence that comes from that, that number is closer to 120 petabytes. And so we're looking at about 127-ish petabytes in circulation in terms of data cap abundancy and availability being the key goal here. And so the hope is to continue improving this rapidly, getting it up to closer to 500 before the end of Q1 to ensure that deal making on Falcon is enabled by Phil Plus as opposed to blocked by Phil Plus. And so excited to sort of keep leveling up and increasing the flow here. Some things to look forward to here are probably better LDN process clarification, improvements to the overall client UX, which sort of is its own row, but will have influence on this, improvements to TTD, same. But then also in general, sort of improving the role of a notary. So interesting discussions have been happening for the last couple of months on like having notaries that are at different levels of expectations, having notaries that can take more of like an automated or can use better automated tooling to reduce the amount of like manual load required, but still like improving the overall due diligence process by increasing the amount of consistency, getting more data from clients upfront so we can reduce the amount of back and forth, et cetera. And so lots of opportunity for growth and lots of already active conversations on that front. So I'm pretty excited to see how the next several months sort of evolve this path for a client. In terms of TTD, we've seen like a drastic improvement. Start of the year, we weren't measuring it, but Q2-ish, it was like, 2 weeks-ish, plus or minus, and even up to like a couple of months ago, this number was closer to like 11 days. But if you really look at the dashboards nowadays and look at where we're at, especially like the number for the last 30 days, it's very, very close to like 1 day and slightly more than 1 day. And so it's awesome to see the progress there. Granted, some of that is definitely coming from continued attention that our automated verifier is receiving, which currently grants out data cap in like 30 seconds or less, of course, if you are eligible for it. And we now have about 1,000 unique addresses on chain that have received data cap. So definitely the numbers being brought down a little bit from that, but that's okay. Like that's part of the client experience to be unblocked on Falcon, and the metric is supposed to account for that. So it's really great to see the progress on that front. In terms of larger numbers of data cap, it's kind of hard to say. The variance is still pretty high. Where I'm trying to calculate TTD for LDNs, which I think will be a useful addition to this conversation. But until then, we're still also continuing to improve on tooling, automation, and we've already had like a discussion on improving this or increasing the scope of automated verification. So we need to get that implemented. Next slide, sir. Thank you. From the risk mitigation standpoint, also tremendous progress in the last quarter. We started this year with 0 dashboards. We were halfway through the year with 2 dashboards, and we're ending the year with 4. And we have a 5th one with a grant out already and a team actively working on fraud and audit tracking for Falcon Plus. So we're excited to share some updates on that early in the new year. And yeah, we're continuing to facilitate better data transparency and availability for different stakeholders in the ecosystem that are excited to explore and share more about their takeaways and generally improve the efficacy and efficiency of the program. I think one call out here is if you're actively working in this space or actively want to be working in this space, there's a channel, Phil Plus Dashboards in the Falcon Slack. It's a little quiet right now, but we'd love to see some of you chatting, asking questions that you have from dashboard owners or asking questions in general about consistency of data across the different tools that exist so that we can have multiple independently verifiable sources of truth of the Falcon Plus system. Client onboarding UX front. This one, not as much progress this year, but we are working on drafting up an RFP to improve the UX side of things for clients that are looking to get data cap. So excited to share more in the new year on that. And then last and absolutely not least, Falcon Plus governance. Lots of recent progress here, primarily thanks to K-Ray getting ramped up and being able to support just general notary operations and community operations. So really excited to have him on board on the governance team. But specific things to call out, we have a live RFP for the notary leaderboard that we talked about several weeks ago. In case that's something you're interested in building or helping build, definitely check that out. I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere useful. And then we've started getting more used to using discussions about the issues. We're going through FIPS. There's at least one active FIP that is worth sort of thinking about and actively contributing towards, and another active discussion on a FIP. So nice to see us sort of adopting the general Filecoin community tooling that exists. And so lots of progress there, better process maturation, and better engagement overall as we round out this year. With that, unless there's any questions, back to you.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Nicely said. So this is just a quick refresh. You're going to see the calendar invites come through tomorrow. We didn't want to change anything before it happened. That way, in case something broke, we didn't have it happen. So coming up first is the holiday schedule next week. There's going to be limited people in home offices taking place, so you might see a delayed response. If it's an emergency, please tag us and just write, hey, this is an emergency, and of course, we'll be there to help. But otherwise, you might see a little bit of delay coming through from December 24th up until January 2nd. As a quick reminder again, the January 4th call is break. So hug your loved ones, get an extra hour of work in, whatever you want to do with that time. And we're going to resume the calls on January 11th. So you'll see a new invite come through. I'll also be DMing you to see if you're keen to have a specific invite sent to your calendar. Right now, we have you add through the Notary Governance shared calendar on Google. I know sometimes it's helpful to have it automatically populate on your calendar going forward. So if you're keen off that, I'll be messaging asking you if you want that, and we'll just put you into the automatic invite. So we'll automatically refresh, and we'll get to see your face as you come through. The second thing, just for high level, is the Notary leaderboard. So the RFP is now published. I'll share the link in chat right now so you can take a look at it. We've already gotten a little bit of interest on it. And so if you are keen to put in a proposal, or you have friends that might be a great addition to this community or would do the work, we'd love to hear from them. At a high level, this is kind of the goal, is that you can look right at a dashboard, almost like a scoreboard layout, see all the notaries, and just kind of have a quick check-in. Who has been along the program the longest? How much data cap has been allocated? Where are you from? And the goal of this is to kind of continue to foster that community of backing up data in a safe and responsible way, and then have a metric to kind of tie that to it. So again, this RFP, just posted it in there. Feel free to take a look if you know anybody that'd be helpful. Love to get their input on it as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Galen for a discussion on 345.
As me. So let me actually post this in the chat as well. We have had multiple conversations about this. K-Ray, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link and opening it so we could see it here. Just a reminder for everybody, the LDN process right now has 3 calculation steps to determine how much data cap a client will get. For their first allocation, it's lesser of 5% total or 50% weekly. And then it moves from there. So for a lot of our clients, they're requesting 5 petabytes total with an estimated weekly usage of 100 petabytes. So their first allocation is 50 petabytes. Second is 100 petabytes. Third is 200 petabytes. And that's kind of right now the cap, is they can get allocations of 200 petabytes at a time for most of our clients. So all that we are doing here is proposing adding 2 more calculation steps, not changing anything to the first 3, but just saying the 4th allocation would be 40% or 400 of the weekly. 5th allocation is 80% total or 800% of the weekly. We wanted to kind of honor what we've heard from some specific clients and notaries in various places, and also for now keep that kind of onboarding scale so that a brand new client who we maybe don't have a lot of information about is still kind of working through that allocation process. So wanted to bring this up. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions or comments on this specific proposal. Any hands from the peanut gallery? Okay, so with that, there were no other questions or comments in the first one either. As I've said, I think that we've talked about this a few times. I think that's not incredibly controversial. I'm going to leave that proposal open until the next governance call that we have in January. At that time, we'll do one last check to see if there are any notary questions. Otherwise, we'll probably ratify it at that January call and implement it then. It's not a huge technical lift to change. So it doesn't really change much of the notary experience at all. It'll just help give clients the ability to get to 8 weeks of runway of data cap, which I think will help our enterprise level clients. So thank you for that time. Let's talk about Slingshot.
Yeah, so specifically Slingshot Restore, which is different than Slingshot V2, which is what you usually hear about when we're here to talk about Slingshot, of which its phase 2.7 is still ongoing and continuing to onboard data onto the network. But Restore is specifically a program that was stood up at the start of last week after we had like a data loss incident with the data center catching fire and burning down and losing a tremendous amount of data that had been stored onto the network. And so the goal of this program is basically to restore specifically 2.5 petabytes of unique data. And the data sets are the same sort of public open data sets that were selected for Slingshot and are publicly verifiable, publicly obtainable, ideally for free, and stored on Slingshot with the intent of having like a distributed storage mirror for them in the long term. The program it's like Slingshot on steroids in some ways, where there's very, very tight sort of coordination and communication across the different involved entities of the program to ensure that the data is being stored with very, very high standards, extremely high quality, and retrievability in the long term. So specifically, clients and storage providers are applying to participate, are being manually selected based on their experience, their location, their ability to process data, seal data, and make deals with it, and their access to capital. The last one being important because one of the big blockers we're seeing with deal making with Filecoin Plus, especially today, is that collateral requirements are pretty high. And so in general, getting storage providers access to lots of Falcon to seal verified deals is not a trivial thing to do. And Slingshot Restore certainly has an aspect of urgency to it in that it's the first time that the network is going through like this size of data loss. And it's not uncommon to need to sort of have best practices in place to guard against data loss. In that like lots of traditional cloud providers have this issue, but just have extremely well-oiled processes in place where they are able to handle data loss incidents without an end user even experiencing a difference in their service. Falcon, of course, is still young, but it would be great to get to that stage where we're fully aware of what our throttling is, our bandwidth limitations are, and how quickly the network can get data back up on its feet and accessible to clients in the ecosystem. And so Slingshot Restore, more than anything else, is an experiment in also vetting that sort of end-to-end process and taking learnings for the entire network on like how quickly can we actually repair and restore and recover data that might be lost on the network. And so Slingshot clients themselves are being held to an incredibly high standard to ensure that the way in which this data is stored is like the absolute best possible practices. So we're specifically doing like a mapping of like clients that are applying with specific data sets that they'll be onboarding and parts of data sets that they're onboarding. They're expected to get us like a list of individual CIDs that are mapped to those data sets and then store at least 5 geo-distributed replicas of those CIDs. And we're defining geo-distribution as crossing 3 countries and crossing 2 continents. And each of those replicas should be in a different city. So definitely ensuring that like there's high availability, even if there's such a scenario again, we will not be impacted by it. We're also allowing for one replica to be self-dealt in guidance with both the Falcon Plus principles of no more than 20% being at the place of a storage provider that might be doing the BD for a client, but also because it's extremely important in getting like recovery with speed. And the fastest way that you can make deals is if you're sitting right next to where the deals are being made. And so it's incredibly important to get that first replica up as soon as possible to make it available for retrieving clients in the network. And so it'll be good to see for the long term, like what the bandwidth limitations might be there. In addition to just networking, but like how long does it actually take to process the data and make it ready for deal making, like getting it into a car file and doing all the compy generation stuff, but also then making deals, even if it's with very minimal data transfer and networking latency. I am personally syncing up with all the participating clients this week, but other people on the Slingshot admin team will continue to uphold that every single week until the program rounds out in February, other than next week, I think, which we're taking off. And we're also working to manually approve each of the storage providers that they're storing that data with. And so this is like a very tightly coordinated and controlled loop that should hopefully ensure that the program falls into the pit of success and the data being onboarded is long-term available and reliable on the network. Cool. Just to talk a little bit more from sort of your perspective as a notary, like the main ask is that Restore is like the first sort of program in its kind, and hopefully not too many more, but it is important in that it's the first time we're dealing with the network's ability to repair like lost data and recover data that used to be on the network and no longer is. And so setting a tone for the urgency and the prioritization of this is very important to the long-term success of the network. I understand that it's also like holiday season and stuff, so there's a few compounding factors here, but it's still like something that I want to flag as like top of mind for those of you that are around and are available over the next few weeks. We would really appreciate if you keep an eye out for this and ensure that we're able to enable the clients that are participating in this program. And of course, even though the data is publicly accessible and we're doing all this coordination, it is also an exercise in due diligence in ensuring that like notaries have an ability to understand like what's actually happening and setting a standard in like community-based programs to onboard data at scale onto the network by ensuring high level of data transparency, coordination, and communication about how the program is actually sort of conducting itself, and also the success it's having over a period of time. I see a hand from Mr. O'Brien. What's up?
Hello. I just wanted to clarify a few things in my head. So the data that we're restoring is data that was lost and was part of the original Slingshot public data storage, or is this a new set of data? Okay.
Yeah, so Slingshot itself has been running for basically a year at this point. And so a lot of it is like earlier data sets that were stored in the previous phases. But then what we did is we actually ran a bunch of analysis on the deals that were lost and the CIDs specifically that were lost, and mapped those CIDs to specific data sets because we had that metadata from participating teams. Then what we did is we looked at the CIDs that had another copy somewhere else on the chain. And if that happened, then they fall into this other program that we're not talking about here called Slingshot Repair. And Repair is basically fetching from those CIDs and rebuilding additional replicas through Estuary and other deal brokers that already exist. And so that's cool in and of itself and a very important part of data recovery, but different than what Restore cares about. And Restore specifically cares about the CIDs that do not have any other copy elsewhere in the Falcon network.
Right. So, okay, that makes sense to me. So we're talking about like several sets here. We've got the sets of ones where perhaps there were like 10 copies made and now there are 9 copies on the network. So you're trying to get back that 10th one. Yeah. This is ones where that was kind of probably just as a result of how Slingshot was organized, there was just one provider or they were stored in one storage.
Yeah, so it's actually from co-locating storage organizations. The earlier rules had like basically identification purely based on like an entity. And so a lot of folks who were like being service providers or storage providers for Slingshot clients happened to co-locate in one massive data center. And so the original sort of premise of wanting to distribute across like fault domains or infrastructure failure domains was kind of lost in that, but there was no verification happening at that level to be able to prove otherwise. And so even though they may have stored them with like individual organizations, ultimately the failure impacted all of those. And so every replica went down. Now we're very fortunate that this is public data, and so we can still obtain the data from like its various mirrors in the Web 2 world. But yeah.
This really reminds me of the early days of the internet, where people would think that they had multiple co-located, they have multiple backups, but in fact they all ended up in the same place. So
yeah.
I mean,
so it's a good lesson for us too, in terms of like getting better at like tracking replica distribution. And I think that's also going to be a really interesting step for two reasons. One is there's a lot of work happening around like indexing, right? And like development of index nodes in the network to help with retrieval. But even discounting or irrespective of that, there's this aspect of like wanting to serve CDN-like capability from Falcon. And the main thing there will be geo-distribution in a way that latency is as low as possible. So you're actually fetching from the node that's closest to where the request is being made. And without a clear understanding of like map of data or like geographic distribution of data, you can't optimize for the physics for like what it means to go to retrieve that. And so I think this is going to lead to some really good and interesting outcomes in terms of like what can be parallelized in the network, what can be sped up, and like what are the main like bandwidth limiting factors, like what are the interesting ways to solve them. So for example, we did a bunch of analysis this past week and learned that shipping hard disks almost in every single case will beat like a network-based transfer. But shipping hard disks is then dependent on an actual shipper. So think about the holiday season and like DHL or UPS or whatever needing to actually ship hard disks, or hard disk supply itself being constrained, like needing to acquire the hard disks to sell them. There's a lot of opportunities here for like partnering with suppliers, partnering with even like delivery systems and logistics to ensure that these things happen a lot quicker. So there's a lot of room for growth, but we haven't like gotten to double click on a lot of parts of this process. And I think this program will let us do that in a level of granularity and depth that we haven't had before in the Falcon network. So I'm pretty optimistic about some of the takeaways here, because I do think they're going to influence a lot of the thinking, either in like the core development of the protocol, or more interestingly, I think in the development of different tools in the ecosystem or companies in the ecosystem that can speed up the efficiency of the network.
Yeah, this points to, I mean, the thing that we're seeing in a lot of places that's really useful for us as notaries too, which is just having ways to label storage providers with useful metadata, right? So like the Filecoin Green project and others. So, I mean, right now we have some very broad information about roughly regional locations of storage providers, but the more information we can give on that, the more that as notaries we can make sure that there's also a diversity of storage when we're approving verified data, which would be useful for us. So great, thank you.
Cool. And so just, I mean, also for the notaries, because the due diligence that you want to be doing is like, is this client actually participating? Are they being held to the right standard? I'm trying to make that as easy as possible, not specifically for you, but also specifically for just generally the admin and the operations of the program. But why not knock out two birds in one stone? So for those of you that are looking at this deck later, because I think we might be able to give access to it, these are the links that you should care about. The first of which is this thing under client address info, which is on Kerry's third tab of his browser. He's going to pop up in a sec. And what I'll be able to show you guys, oh, not this one, the one before. Awesome. Thank you so much. So this is a expanded table that basically shows you the name of a client, their Slack handle, their address with which they're going to be making Slingshot Restore deals, and the data set specifically. So the slug, which is how you'll be able to search for it in our Slingshot database once we publicize that, or the actual like name of the data set. And so this is compelling because as a notary, you're now able to see exactly what the address is that they're applying with, cross-check that against their name and cross-check that against the data set. So that effectively should reduce the time for due diligence specifically. And assuming that you support our general like distribution requirement, you'll see that I've had them list out each of their storage providers. So we know exactly where they're going, and we're vetting these in terms of region and stuff like that. And if you want to double click into the storage providers as well, the second link in the deck points to the list of storage providers. And in that list, you can actually see each of the storage providers that are currently registered, their Slack handles in case you want to ask them any questions, the role they're playing in Slingshot Restore, the IDs that they have on chain, the amount of data they're willing to onboard in the next 2 months, whether or not they'll be making verified or unverified deals, and what their stated location is in the world. And so in every case that we can, we're actually validating the geographic location based on the peer IDs on the network, because that's going to be useful for us from a Slingshot like geo-distribution perspective. But it should be useful to you as well from like a, yes, indeed, these replicas are going to be built in a way that they're geographically distributed and available. And so one to stress this as well is like this is also like a good example of like what a notary process could look like in the future, right? Where we want to have clients be more upfront with the data they're providing. In a way, like I'm attempting to do that with this set of clients where it's like, oh, here's all the info that theoretically you'd want to know. Here's the standard that they're being held to. Here's like where the storage providers are and the ways in which they're deciding what to store and how to store it. And here's how you can also access the data that they're storing. And so to answer the last question, if you go back to the client spreadsheet, you have a second tab in here, which is called data sets. And if you check that list, it actually has like enumerated which are the data sets, how big is each one, if there's any specific directories within them that we're asking people to prioritize. And for each of these data sets, clients are being asked explicitly not to compress them, which then yields much better retrieval in the future. Once we support partial retrieval, people will be able to retrieve just the files they need or just the directories they need. And in most cases, this data is being downloaded directly from like AWS open data sets or Google open data sets or Azure open data, where all of that is like nonprofit oriented, available for free. And this way we're able to create a mirror of it in a distributed manner in more locations, because those cloud providers are often just doing it in West US or wherever the data center is cheapest and not specifically optimized for this. One really interesting thing that I learned today was one of the data sets that we lost a little bit of data from, Landsat 8 actually had to change its downloading policy to not be free anymore because of changes in policy with some of the organizations that were supporting the egress of the data from an S3 bucket on AWS. So you can't actually go get the data set for free anymore unless you get it directly from their website, which has like some bugs in it and stuff. And so that's been really interesting, because it's like, oh, wouldn't it have been great if we had a replica of this on Falcon available for people to retrieve at an extremely low cost? Because right now, pulling that off of AWS will cost you approximately $15,000 for that data set, which is quite substantive. And so this is like a pretty cool use case for exactly this work. Unfortunately, it now means it's not so trivial for us to like get that initial data. So we've reached out to the geological survey like government arm, I guess, the USGS. And so we'll try to work with them to figure out how we can get that data in a cheaper way and then get a mirror of it up on Falcon. Yeah, good use case, hopefully. And I'm pretty excited to see, with like the sense of urgency, with the coordination across the entire system between client storage providers and notaries that are available, how quickly can we actually bring back data onto the network? Like, what does it mean for like a week in the network in terms of onboarding stuff that's actually lost? And is it tenable for us to defensively say that like Falcon is a resilient network, or like how far are we from that as a standard, and like what work do we want to do in 2022 to ensure that we can say that with confidence? So yeah, I'm looking forward to having your support for these clients. Please let me know if you have any questions now or later. I know a couple of you have already looked at some of these applications and have questions. Some of the applications are coming in preemptively, like clients are claiming to have data sets when they haven't even been picked. So please view this link as the definitive source of which are the currently engaged active clients. I do expect that we'll have quite a bit of churn as clients realize whether or not they can participate in this program. So I'll keep updating this on a daily basis and flag you if there are any substantive changes. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Deep. Neo, I think that answers some of your questions from yesterday that we were working on. And then I just wanted to jump in here from the sort of LDN side of things. K-Ray, if you wouldn't mind clicking to the, I think it's your second tab. We should just be able to like drive your remote control your screen, right? Oh no, I lied. Maybe it's the last one. I think there are 3 LDNs right now. Yep, here we go. There are 9 LDNs open for this program, and 3 of which need signatures. So if you are on this call, when you finish this call, jumping in and checking those LDNs and looking at them would be great. In addition to these 9 open LDNs, 3 of which need signatures, I think there's like 27 other large data sets that are ready for signatures too. So while signing these Slingshot ones, can sign some other ones in there as well. I forgot one other announcement in our annual yearly recap. Just wanted to throw out some kudos to the notaries. We did have an LDN fully complete and close and go through it's working through its full requested allocation, and that was Faye. So this is like a major success in our opinion. I think he went through 2 petabytes of data cap working with Slingshot. So great job. Let's jump back over to the slides and go back one slide, please. I'll just sort of present a little bit of this, and then the recording, when it goes live, will have our guest speaker from the earlier call, Greg Sharpstein. He is working with a storage provider, and that storage provider is working to do business development with some clients, specifically clients that have some large public data sets, but the clients themselves are trying to do some internal pilot testing. And so, you know, the very large client is not sure if it wants to adopt the Filecoin network as a data storage service, so they want to do a pilot program. And in the meantime, they would like to remain confidential as a client, just to avoid various, you know, internal politicking while they do this test. The data itself would still be public and publicly downloadable. So the question here is really not one of encrypted data. The question here is of a confidential client going through the Falcon Plus process. And how do we feel about that? How would we do the diligence on it? And I think one of the flags that came up in that conversation is how will they find and work with other storage providers? Because at this point, one storage provider will be standing themselves up to kind of represent this client's interest. And so they may not necessarily, you know what other storage providers they would be working with. And the client may not want to, for this pilot test, store multiple copies in a decentralized way. So that's kind of an ongoing conversation that's happening right now. This was sort of just a first introductory investigation into how Filecoin Plus would think about approving a situation like this. So I think, did they open a discussion topic, K-Ray, as well? No, okay. So maybe a next step would be for us to also just open a discussion topic to get a asynchronous place for that conversation to happen. Just pausing here, seeing if there are any questions on that, knowing that I am neither the client nor the storage provider who brought this. I'm just a guy in a hat who was on a call this morning. Don't see any hands on that. Deep has a hand. Deep, you were on the call this morning too.
Yeah, I know. I just one thing that I don't think we got as much of a chance to talk about this morning that I do think would be interesting to talk about here, especially because Meg is on the line and has good experience with this kind of client, is just in general, like how we want to support, encrypted data or more like private-ish data in the medium long term. This was a very hot topic of conversation a few months ago in our community, but I think lately the focus has been more on like general like TTD and LDNs and onboarding notaries and tooling and stuff. But I do think it's a very pertinent topic. And there were some pretty cool ideas that were suggested at the time. I know that Fenbushi and IPFS Union and a couple other notaries, especially those based in China, were working on a offline verification method where they would have clients send them like a little bit like a sample of the data to prove like what it was and what they'd be storing, and then map that based on CIDs back into the deals that were being made on the network. And then Jonathan Hooker, who's Meg's teammate over at Holon, had a really cool idea of basically storing some of the data already encrypted on IPFS and then sharing the decryption keys for some of it with a subset of the notaries that could approve the LDN. And then given that, basically prove that it's the same content being stored onto the network, but more of it. And probabilistically, at least if you've established trust with the client at that point, it's the same type of data, just at scale. And that could be a really cool model as well. But I do think we should continue to push on this one, especially early in the new year, and look at ways in which we want to do this, because enabling this, I think, will be incredibly important in early on to unblock these kinds of POCs and projects, which I know are coming down the pike, Q1, Q2 of next year. And it'll be paramount in enabling the success of Web2 companies or Web2 projects that will finally get to transition to the Web3 world. And so I'd love to see us sort of evolve and become a huge lever for that kind of success, for that kind of profile of customer. Danny?
I'm just going to act like I've come up with what Meg and Stefan are just saying in chat, which is we should definitely try and make this work. I think that, that my feeling on these things is always that the thing we're trying to avoid is self-dealing by storage providers. So as long as there is the commitment to store this data with more than one storage provider, which I don't see why that would be an issue. I think that anybody wanting to build this out would probably be sensitive to wanting to store, or at least test out having multiple redundant copies, and they'll be able to store it for free. I don't think that's a bad condition to put on this. And I think if we have that, then we can kind of, we don't have to worry too much about some of the other aspects of confidentiality. And I think it's fine if one storage provider is representing a confidential client. I think it's just the condition of getting Falcon plus verification is going to be a distribution of that data, that trial data, across the whole network.
Yeah. So again, I will only repeat what I heard this morning, as I remember it from Greg, his response there in terms of finding multiple other storage providers was from a business development relationship building standpoint. He's like, I'm a storage provider. I know the service that we can provide and the level of service that we can provide. Our storage provider's reputation is on the line in this pilot with this big client. How do I know when I go and find 4 other storage providers? I've done a lot of relationship building with this client to get them to trust doing a 10 petabyte. So now I'm going to need to go do that much confidence building to another storage provider somewhere else, so that I can then go back to my client and say, I'm also going to vouch for this person. And so I get where he's coming from in that mindset of if you're doing a business development sales cycle, you're now having to say, I got to play this middleman broker to go as a storage provider to the competition and find another storage provider that I will vouch for to go back to the client to say, in order for us to do this pilot proof of concept, we need to find 4 other people. I found those 4 for you. Trust me. You're now asking for a lot of trust. Again, this is not my argument. This is just what he presented. I said that that's kind of the Danny, to your point, that's the flip of the pro of the Filecoin network, right? Is that you're the whole point here is that you, the client, have this choice to pick who you want to work with and have this decentralization and have the ability to, flex this market against itself for competition to say, I want to get the best price for the best service by, having choice. So I agree with all these things that we should make it work. I also agree that part of making it work in my mind is not compromising on this value prop of data decentralization.
Well, I think the sell here is twofold. One is that I don't think that any storage provider has to make any assurances about the reliability of another storage provider. It's just a test of a particular capability, and that can be explained. The second thing is if they're storing 10 petabytes through the Filecoin Plus system, whatever storage provider brings that to their own network is being remunerated for it, right? Like they're getting 10 petabytes times 10 of what they would normally get to put storage, and this is just for a demo. So I think that there's sufficient incentive within that system for them to have some leeway to go and work with other storage providers to provide the kind of redundancy that I think any big customer is going to want anyway. But like I said, I don't want to use you as the proxy. I'm just happy to have that conversation with them. So thanks.
Yeah, amazing. Like I said, I think we'll work with Greg Sharfstein and try and get a discussion topic. We'll probably post that in the Slack channel once we have a asynchronous place for this conversation to happen. And I think as far as like, how do we make this work? It would be great to have some asynchronous back and forth ideas so that at the next governance call in January, we have an actual proposal that we can kind of weigh in on and see how we feel so that we can start a pilot, as soon as possible and not lose some of this momentum. So with that, we've got 6 minutes according to my clock. If there are some other open discussion issues, any hands?
Andy, you can just speak what you have in chat.
No, I'm just I'm done. I will add that to the real discussion. I'm just doing the opposite of hands here to say.
You're putting your hand down. That's what you're.
I'm starting to put them up and then I'm dropping them just when you were getting excited.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. We'll speed up. Well, if that's the case, I think we can go ahead and cut off the recording. Thanks, everybody. And hopefully you have